Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Roland Frazier, and Kevin Nations. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 27 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you can email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Mitch Russo. Mitch built one of the earliest and most successful software enterprises in the 80s, which he sold and then continued to run as COO with a team of more than 300 people. Since then, he's dedicated himself to helping numerous entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, in addition to founding several successful ventures of his own. Among these, he founded Business Breakthroughs International, in which he partnered with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to create a phenomenally successful business while serving countless entrepreneurs. He's the author of the best-selling books, The Invisible Organization and Power Tribes, and he's been featured on numerous programs throughout the media. I'm very pleased to welcome here today my friend Mitch Russo. Welcome, Mitch.
You mean Mitch Russo and bunkmate? That you didn't say that part, Rich.
I didn't say that yet. Yes, I guess we can get there. So we both had the privilege of kind of being bunkmates at summer camp, not back when we were kids, but just a few years back when we went to a kind of a fun entrepreneur camp, which took place in an actual kids summer camp in Pennsylvania, and we spent a few days up there, and that was awesome. Awesome event, and great to get to know you.
Yeah, it was. Same here.
Cool. So, well before the summer camp, you were very involved in the software business back in the 80s, which is really when people even began to think of software as being a possible business or a possible business model, as opposed to something that just comes along with the computer or like that. So how did you get involved in computer software, and how did you get involved in software business?
Well, I was selling semiconductors as a rep. So there's in the semiconductor industry, there's two different ways that semiconductor manufacturers distribute their products. One is through a distributor like Arrow Electronics or some of the others. And then companies would then buy them from a distributor. That's how most wholesale businesses operate. But then at the higher level, there's reps. A rep represents the company, hence the name rep. And we go out and we try and sign new distributors and very large scale clients. So I was tagging along as I normally did. I was an applications engineer for Mostech, which was a semiconductor company. And I was being paid a very nice salary. But I frankly was highly educated and very skilled at what I did. But the guy I was tagging along with was making about 5 or 6 times what I made. And he had never even got a high school degree. He was calling on the buyers in the purchasing department, and he was closing these deals and making a fortune. So I started to get a little curious about what he was doing. And I said, well, wait a minute, I want to do that too. And so I transitioned from being an engineer to being a salesperson. And as I got deeper and deeper into the electronics industry as a rep, I started to understand what was going on the software side. So I realized that all this great stuff people were doing on the semiconductor side required software to drive it. In fact, I was involved with microprocessors quite heavily. And then finally, Bill Gates, you remember that guy? He had.
I think I recognize the name. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a little software company called Microsoft, and he had a cute little product called Basic and DOS. And I said, we're going to miss the boat. I kept saying to myself, I'm going to miss the boat here if I don't do something quick. So I'm having breakfast one day with one of my new neighbors. And I said to him, look, I'm having a problem. I'm trying to build a database to sort my accounts. And I'd like to create like a DBase 2 database so I could do this. And in the process, I kept explaining to him that I can't deduct my own personal computer from my tax return because the IRS said it was a toy. And so this started a discussion until we got to the point where it had come down to the fact that there was a legal ruling that said that if that computer is documented, if you keep, the word was contemporaneous records of its usage, you then can deduct that computer from your taxes as a write-off. So I said, great, I'll get some contemporaneous record-keeping software and do it. Well, Rich, there was none. And that became the beginning of Timeslips Corporation. So we built this product, we released it, or just about to release it. In fact, we both quit our jobs, and Monday morning, we're just about to release this product. We've been working on it in the background for 6 months. And that same day, the IRS relaxed its rulings and said, nope, we don't need them anymore. That's fine. So we now had a useless product. And we had to pivot, Rich, because we had no idea what we were going to do with this cool new software technology that we had kind of invented. And that's when the idea of building software for lawyers came up. And so we did some research into what lawyers needed, actually quite a bit of research. And we had discovered that, in fact, we had 2/3 or 3/4 of what we needed to build a very powerful time tracking and legal billing system. And so we went about and started that work. And that's how I got into the software business.
Got it. And you kept the name Timeslips, I think.
Yes, we did. We trademarked that name, and that became an asset later, which we sold to Sage.
Oh, wow. Okay. So essentially, though, and it's funny you used the word pivot, because I don't know if anyone used that word back then. That probably came about in the last 10 years in the lean startup and people talking about pivoting, and but back then it's like people didn't even talk about pivoting, right? People just thought like you launch your company and you take a straight arrow approach towards building it. And I guess that was the textbook example of the ones that failed, right?
Well, I should have used the word panicked instead of pivoted, because that's what we basically did. We panicked. I mean, it was stuff getting thrown around the room, cursing and screaming. And, we just, by the way, burned the boats. I mean, we both left our jobs. So now we had no work. And so we had no choice, Rich. We got this base. It's pretty cool. It works really well. What else can we do with it? And that's when we started brainstorming. And that's when we came up with this whole idea of just, in fact, technology wise, it was quite simple to move to where we needed to go. Now, I'm a believer of everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to. At the moment, you couldn't have convinced me of that. But in looking back, had that not happened, we would have probably had a cute little company, sold a few dozen copies of our little software product to deduct your PC. Instead, we ended up with a $10 million company with 250,000 customers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And, and I guess the interesting thing too about that time is that like you had, you had an initial need which evaporated and you found a new need.
Yeah.
And a new need for something rather similar that used similar infrastructure that you'd already created for this product.
Yep.
And I guess one of the cool things about that time though too is there was nothing but needs out there for software. There was just almost anything you could think of hadn't been invented yet with regards to software and automation. And I think you were involved in the beginning of the software business, but you've taken that same stance and have helped people to automate businesses and processes throughout your career, correct?
Yeah. Again, as my career proceeded, as I built and then sold Timeslips Corporation, I got in the business of helping venture capital firms take their problem companies and accelerate them. So I became sort of a debugger. I'd be sent in, and in anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks later, we'd restructure the startup and we'd accelerate growth rapidly from that point forward.
Got it. And so you got involved in helping people throughout in the business world, but really you took a focus toward personal growth as well, like with getting involved with partnering with Chet Holmes and Tony Robbins. So how did you get into that world, into the personal growth world? Was it through your expertise in automation, or was it through an interest in personal growth that actually got you there?
Well, I always had an interest in personal growth. I had listened to Tony Robbins and owned Tony Robbins audio tapes for years before I ever met him. But the way that I got together with Chet and Tony in this venture was because Chet was, at the time I was building time slips, he was selling software. Yeah, I'm sorry, he was selling ad space in California Lawyer Magazine. And if you've read Chet's book, The Ultimate Selling Machine, one of the concepts in there he calls the Dream 100. And I was one of his Dream 100 clients. In other words, he would do anything to get those 100 people, those 100 clients to work with him. So he sent me gifts. He flew out to see me. He took me to elaborate dinners, and we did all this fun stuff together until finally, after a year and a half, I finally agreed to go into the magazine, which was an amazing experience, frankly. And we had become, at that point, very, very, very dear friends. And that was in 1988, 87, 88. And then later, after I sold to Sage, I invited Chet in to help train our sales team. So I hired Chet at that point. Chet hired me, then I hired Chet, and he was helping me train the Sage sales team. And then later, Chet asked me for some help, and I helped him with his little consulting company, which Chet Holmes International at the time. And before long, I started out like doing a few little things as favors. Before 3 or 4 months was over, I was president of the company. And that's when he received that momentarily famous phone call from Tony Robbins. And Tony said, "I've been following your stuff. Let's get together." And I was not included in that first meeting. I think Chet flew out to Canada or Toronto to meet with Tony. And then after Chet came back, he had told Tony about me and said, well, the three of us should form a company together called Business Breakthroughs International. And that's how I got involved with that. Now, just to answer your question more directly, before that, I spent a year as vice president of sales and marketing of a little personal development company called the Sedona Training Institute. If you go to sedona.com, they publish a product originally by Lester Levinson called the Sedona Method, which is like a personal development meditation type product of which I loved. I spent a lot of time with it. I enjoyed the product, I enjoyed the company, and I enjoyed that space. And so by the time I ended up joining, and the time Chet, Tony, and I built Business Breakthroughs International, I'd already been well steeped into both growing companies, personal development, and automation and running things with my technology and engineering background.
Got it. That's fascinating. And it's really a great place to be, though, too, to be running a business in the personal growth space. You have no choice but to grow yourself.
That's right.
being in that world.
Yeah.
And so then where does certifications fit in? How did that lead towards your interest in certifications and helping people create certification programs?
Well, you see, I didn't really know what certification was. So when I was building Timeslips Corporation, we had a severe but good problem. We were selling so much software that our tech support teams couldn't keep up. And so what was starting to happen is I was basically walking around my call center, watching the hold times go beyond 12 minutes. And I was freaking out. I said, this isn't good. I got to hire more people. We got to make the software easier. We got to attack this from 3 different angles. And then the thing that happened is I received a threatening phone call from the, and I won't mention names, but she was the head of the technology division of the Los Angeles Bar Association, and said that my software had crashed a computer and she was going to tell the world how terrible time slips was. And I said, well, no, we got to fix this, because I know the software doesn't crash computers. We had thousands of people using it, but it didn't matter. That was her perception. So what I was about to do was I was about to fly down there myself or get somebody on my team to do it, when I had the thought, well, wait a minute, I was just in Los Angeles and met a bunch of people who told me how much they loved our software and how good they were at using it. So I remember one in particular individual, her name was Ann, and I called her up out of the blue. I said, hey, Ann, this is Mitch Russo. And she goes, Mitch Russo, oh my God, I can't believe you called me. And so we're now on the phone and she's telling me again how much she loves time slips. I said, look, I got a favor. I'll pay you for this if you just tell me how much, and no problem at all. But I have a client who is really in need of some help. And she goes, no, Mitch, I can never take money. You've made my life so much easier, blah, blah, blah. So I told her to please go over to this person's office and help out, see if you could fix what's going on or report back to me, and I'll do it. And next thing I know, it's like 5 hours later, and I'm pacing my little house at that point, hoping for the phone to ring. And finally it rings, and it's Ann. And she goes, oh yeah, it was no problem at all. We solved the problem, and she's completely up and running. And she loved time slips now. She's just loves time slips. And I got to tell you the best part, Mitch. I said, what's that? She gave me $100 bill. And I was so excited to get that. So thank you again, Mitch. I said, and then she said the words that changed my whole life. She said, and if you ever need anybody else that is needed my help, you just let me know. And it was like all of a sudden, like my brain exploded and I couldn't go to sleep at that point. I said, oh my God, what would happen if I had 2 Anns or 5 Anns or 10 Anns or 100 Anns all over the country helping my clients get time slips running and using it more effectively? That would solve my tech support problems. And that was the motivation to create a test that I sold to my user base. If they passed, they were certified. Big mistake, but I didn't know that at the time. So we started selling these tests. Before long, we were generating, remember now, this is 1987. We were generating $25,000 a month selling tests. I mean, it was crazy. But what happened was all we tested was competence in the technology. We didn't really do any examination of the individual at all. And that's where we almost lost the company. So I had about 60 of these people out there. We were deploying them out into the field. I'm happy. Tech support times are starting to drop a little bit. And then I start getting complaints. Complaints led to threats. And these were from clients who said, these people come into our firm. They smell like they haven't bathed in 3 weeks. They look like Elmer Fudd. They're completely unprofessional. On top of that, they're rude to my staff. And they didn't even do what they said they were going to do. I said, oh my God. So I shut down the entire program and I called everyone who had a complaint, and there were many. And I documented by hand in writing every single problem and complaint and committed to solving it on the spot, which I did. But I learned a lot. I learned that what we were missing wasn't just the technology part of the training, but the culture part of the training. And that's when I created an entire culture generation system along with the pillars of what we call the code of ethics. And I took these components and I reintroduced the entire system back to my client base. And we went from, at that time, from 60 certified consultants down to 0, because I closed the program, back up to 350 certified time slips consultants. And that little team, they begged me, can we please sell the product? Can we please sell the product? I finally said, sure. That turned into my 3rd largest sales force. So now I'm generating money from selling a yearly certification. I'm generating money from them being a sales force and selling my products. I'm generating even more recurring revenue from them showing up every year to be with us once a year at a symposium. And on top of that, we started building marketing programs, and they bought into those marketing programs as well. Now, we had some amazing success stories. We had people become certified in time slips, go off, start their own consulting business. So it was a super win-win for everybody. And it wasn't until years later that someone had read an article about what I did and asked if I would do it for them. And that became the beginning of me helping people create powerful multi-recurring revenue systems called certification. And then finally, after I got done with several clients, I said, you know what, it's time to document this process. And that's when I wrote the book called Power Tribes.
Oh, very interesting. So initially, it all came about because you realized that the people that were to help your business didn't have any customer service training, didn't have any culture to be the type of people you wanted representing you. Right. And it kind of led you to reinvent the team, reinvent the process of creating the team,
right?
So that you could have people that could fairly represent you. And then I guess other people or someone else took notice of that and said, could you do that for me? And you realized again, like you've got an opportunity to take something that you created and bring it out there into the world.
Right. And, you know, you'll see that throughout the time that we're talking today. You'll see the same theme emerge each time. I run into a problem I can't solve. I look for a solution. I can't find a solution. I decide to create a solution, and then I turn that into a business or a service.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I see that, and I'm noticing that, and I think a lot of people follow that, and actually a lot of people I've interviewed on this program like notice those patterns of how they've taken the DNA of the thing that's worked, and they've done it over and over again through different businesses and different contexts.
Yeah,
and that's helped them to create the success that they were after in whatever field they were in. And so then now circling back again towards software. So you created certification programs, and then now you brought the kind of the knowledge of the certification programs and your knowledge from software and creating software back around to create new software that has to do with client certifications. And I think Clientfolio is the name of the product.
Yes. Now, Clientfolio is a SaaS platform for coaches. Mm-hmm. And it basically is a automation system for coach session management. It's a platform. And the reason I created this, Rich, is because I needed it and I couldn't find it. So over the years of being a coach, I have perfected certain processes that highly accelerated the progress of my clients. And I needed to find a way to keep track of these elements of the process itself, along with session notes and homework and next session dates and all these things that are part of what you do when you're a coach. And I just tried 5 different coaching platforms. None of them worked for me. Some of them were more expensive than I could ever imagine. And I said, well, look, I think what this industry needs is a highly, highly productive, low cost, powerful platform that I believe I can bring to market. And so I went to work. I basically created a framework for the way the interface should be. And I wrote an entire feature set and explained each feature in detail and the hierarchy of the system. And I sent it to a team I have been using for years in India. And I asked if they could help me with this, and they said yes. And they said, well, how long is it going to take to make? And they said, oh, about 3 months. I said, oh, you mean like a year, right? And they go, yeah, maybe a year. Yeah. So the bottom line is that, and they're wonderful folks. I mean, they are amazing at what they do. And I expected that, look, I know software takes time. It takes more time than everybody could imagine it would take. And it does. So, right. But we released it in March of this year. And since then, we've gone through 2 major iterations. It's just gotten better and better. And now we have north of 100 paid subscribers. And truth is, everybody loves it. And I'm so happy.
So that is a SaaS company. So you yes. Like the SaaS model? Do you think that the SaaS model really is the one that makes the most sense for software developers today, people that have a solution? Or do you think that it's overplayed? And what do you think is the like is I guess the best advice for someone who's thinking about what business model to follow, whether SaaS or downloadable of some kind?
Well, it all depends on the application and it all depends on the markets. There are certain markets that will not utilize SaaS. Certain large corporations require that if they were to engage with any software platform, they must run it from their own servers.
As a matter of security, I suppose.
As a matter of security. So we don't support that. Now, again, if a corporation came to me and said, this is the only way we'll do it, and I said to them, well, we don't do that. And they said, we're looking to buy 6,000 seats. I said, well, then we certainly will do that. So we will adopt if we have to, and we will create a server-based version. But for most people right now, I'll give you an example, Rich. When I was running TimeSlips Corporation, we had a room the size of the average bedroom that had at the time about $350,000 worth of telecommunications equipment, of PBX. That one room required triple the amount of electricity because of the air conditioning system and the electronics in that room. And it would go obsolete every 3 years. That now I could get the equivalent of that room, except unlimited, for $29 a month. So, I mean, it doesn't even make sense to think about buying equipment and setting up an internal PBX again when I could lease it for $29 a month per person and have more functionality than I ever had before. That's what SaaS does. SaaS gives us the ability to basically share the expense among many customers for something that cost a lot to do. So to develop Clientfolio is, it's basically a six-figure bill. But, once you get 1,000 people on it paying every month, it starts over time to amortize and then become very profitable. So it's worth it.
Absolutely. So what's something that you've learned about finding a solution and automating that you think would be helpful to your average entrepreneur that's kind of struggling through generating their initial results?
Well, I think in a general sense, when you are having difficulty in a particular area, it may be good to get third-party opinion. It might be good to seek outside counsel, if you will. And find maybe a perspective that you're missing. But once again, what I find when I work with newer entrepreneurs is that they have a generalized view of the market and the world. And in most cases, they haven't done the ridiculously hard and detailed work of understanding their own niche as well as it takes to really be successful. Now, you might say at some level, we got a little lucky with TimeSlips because we already had a time tracking product and we were searching for a solution for it. So that niche turned out to be lawyers. But I mean, we did not go out and say, well, what problems are lawyers having right now that we can solve? We don't even like lawyers. Why would we want to solve any problems for them?
Exactly. Right.
Right. So
do we have a way to make their life more difficult?
Yeah. Like for example, my partner and I, we talked about, why don't we build a little secret into the software that says if our name ever gets put in the client field, then it automatically discounts the bill by 50% or something. But we couldn't do that.
Right. That's funny. But you could have an unlock code of some kind.
Right.
Yeah. So that's awesome. And I mean, it just sounds like you've had such rich experiences. What do you think's next for you? What do you think is what's the direction that you most enjoy that you think might pull you, towards other ventures or other whatever's next?
One of the beautiful things about life is sometimes you just don't know what's next. But what I find is that everything you've ever done has prepared you to be in the moment you're in right now. And the next time an opportunity presents itself to me, and I look at that opportunity from the perspective of 40 years of business experience, I will know whether it resonates and I would like to move forward with that. From what I know today, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. I love the work I'm doing with Clientfolio. I love my clients. I love working with them. I certainly just thrills me to build a certification program as I am right now for another BA member a board of advisors member. And I'd love to see that program prosper, flourish, and make them a lot of money, and more importantly, cement their position in the marketplace. Because when you certify a group of people and they represent you in the field, and it's done with full oversight and carefully with a culture program in place, it multiplies the reach of that company by as many people as are out there being certified. So it's an incredible opportunity under the right circumstances to create a very powerful worldwide presence with certification.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, how do they go about doing so?
They can go to MitchRusso360.com. And from there, they can see my book, my software, my Power Tribes certification program, my home website for coaching. All that stuff is right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And really, thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Rich.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.